From I love your content to I'd love to work with you, fixing that elusive gap. And I want to kick off with one question. Where does conversion begin? Most people think it starts when someone reaches out or books a call or replies to your message. And that is so wrong. Conversion begins the moment when somebody first comes across you and your content and quietly asks themselves, will this person get me to where I want to go? So that decision is made long before they ever contact you. And there's a window before any interaction takes place where a person is essentially unguarded and their critical thinking hasn't fully come online. So they're operating out of instinct, pattern recognition, and feelings. And if you match your content to that sequence, then you're not fighting their nervous system. You're rewriting it. So if people are loving your content but not taking the next step, the problem isn't your content. It's what's missing between the love and the yes. And that's exactly what we're fixing today. If we've not met before, I'm Jill Chitty, and I believe the most capable experts shouldn't lose to the most visible ones. And my work exists to close that gap between who you are and how the world sees you. So let me show you what's actually happening in that quiet decision-making moment when somebody first meets you, because conversion doesn't just begin early. It begins in seconds. I want you to think about the first 20 seconds of any piece of content as 4 intervals, and miss one and every interval that follows gets exponentially harder. So the first one is 0 to 5 seconds. And that clock starts the moment someone lands on your content or your profile or your website. And that is the authority imprint. The reader's brain isn't processing your words yet. It's doing one thing, categorizing you. Leader or follower, someone who matters or someone who doesn't. And it's making that call on almost zero information, which means it's entirely relying on what it can sense from those first few lines or brand images. Whether everything they see signals that you have clarity on who you are and what you're doing. And this is where most people lose the conversion without ever knowing it, not because they lack expertise, but because their content lacks clarity about who they help, what they do, and why it matters. The brain can't categorize what it can't read clearly. And an uncategorized person, sadly, gets scrolled past. So that's interval 1. The authority imprint is forming right now. And your reader has categorized you as someone worth paying attention to. Now, interval 2 kicks in, and this runs from 5 to 10 seconds roughly. And this is the novelty break. Here's what's happening. The brain has categorized you, and now it starts listening for confirmation. Is this person actually what they appear to be? And this is where most people completely destroys it. Because what happens next? The writer, the content, usually says the expected thing, the predictable insight. We've all done it. The line that everyone in their niche has said 100 times before. And the reader's brain goes, okay, I already know what this is, and it relaxes. And the second the brain relaxes, you've lost them. The window is gone. So interval 2 is about breaking the unexpected pattern in your content. The unexpected angle, the counterintuitive point, a sentence that doesn't land where they thought it would. And what you're doing is spiking novelty. A novelty triggers something the brain can't ignore, an orienting response, It's not a choice. The brain has to pay attention. And so far, we're not giving the reader a choice either. So interval 3, roughly 10 to 15 seconds, that's what's called identity softening. Here's what's happening in your reader's mind at this point. They're in a state of focused attention. You've earned that. And combined with the uncertainty of your novelty break, something shifts. That internal script, I'm the kind of person who, gets quieter. When someone is fully focused and you've introduced genuine novelty, their grip on who they think they are quietly loosens. They can't hold on to their default position and process something genuinely new at the same time. One of them has to move, and it's never the new idea that moves. So this interval is where what you say lands completely differently, because you're no longer talking to someone with the walls up, and you didn't tear the walls down, you simply made them irrelevant. And this is where the language of your content really starts to matter. Whatever you say here carries disproportionate weight. Think about what that means for your LinkedIn content. This is the moment, buried in the middle of your post, where a single placed line can shift everything. Not a feature, not a benefit, a statement that makes your reader feel seen. Something that says, you already know this is true. You just haven't had anyone say it out loud. That lands 10 times harder than any other brilliant call to action you'll ever write. And then interval 4 is the 15 to 20 seconds. By this point, if you've run everything correctly, you have something most content creators never achieve, even after years of posting. You have authority, you have attention, and your reader's identity is softened enough to receive direction. Now, in this window, we elevate. We're shifting from this content is interesting to, well, this content is important. From capturing attention to capturing meaning. And the way that you do this is by doing something that almost nobody does this early in a piece of content. You give them something absolutely real, a statement with weight, and something that signals this isn't going where you thought it was going. It's going somewhere better. It can be an uncomfortable truth, an observation about their situation that's more perceptive than it should be in that 20-second window. And what you're doing is raising the stakes. When you raise the stakes while holding your authority, your reader leans in. Because the nervous system reads that combination in a very specific way. This person sees me, and they're not afraid or judgmental of what they see. It's powerful. And it's one of the rarest experiences a person can have, feeling genuinely seen. And when your content creates that feeling, the critical mind stops leading. And your reader is no longer evaluating you, they're with you. And the terms of that relationship have been set by you, not them. And this is where conversion starts to begin. So that's the 20-second content map. And I suggest that once this is over, you go back and onto my profile and have a look at this content. The replay automatically goes up on my activity, and map it out as a format and work through it as you write your content. So it's 4 intervals, sequenced in that exact order that the brain is processing what it's reading. And the order matters. Miss one, and everything that follows gets harder. So where do most people go wrong? If you're not getting the authority in print in those first 10 seconds, it's almost always one of three things. You're trying to manipulate, so engineered hooks, false urgency, clickbait, all those things that we love, right? Or you're trying to entertain, content that gets likes, but it never leads to anywhere. Or self-promoting. Look where I spoke, look what I've achieved, look at my new offices, look at who I know. And all three send the same signal to your reader's brain. This person needs something from me. And the moment that signal lands, your authority is gone before they even read past the first line. And with the novelty break, the failure goes in two ways. People either skip it entirely or go straight to the and go straight to the expected, the predictable insight, the safe option, the thing everyone else is saying. Or they overdo it and it becomes disingenuous noise. The sweet spot is a subtle pattern disruption. One unexpected angle, one sentence that doesn't land where they thought it would. But here's what all of this is really about. Once you've run all four intervals, you've created an open window. The reader is with you. The critical mind is trailing behind instead of leading. And now the question is, what do you put in your content? This is where almost every content creator gets it wrong, because they think content is about persuasion. You make an argument, you hope the reader's on your side, and there's resistance built into that model from the very beginning, because the best content doesn't persuade, it resonates. There's a voice running inside every single person who reads your content, the narrator. And it's constantly telling them who you are, what's happening, who they are, what's happening, and what it all means. And every sentence that you write is either syncing with the narrator or bouncing off it. There's no middle ground. When your content syncs with that narrator, something shifts. Your words stop being evaluated. They're absorbed, not because you've convinced anyone of anything, but because what you've said matches the story that they're already telling themselves. That's resonance. And resonance is the difference between content that gets admired and content that converts. You're not pushing a new idea into someone's head. You're becoming part of the stream that's already flowing. So the question isn't, how do I write more persuasive content? The question is, how do I write content that resonates so deeply that conversion feels inevitable? So let's take a look at that right now. So we've created an open window. The reader's with you, and now the question is, what do you put in there? Here's one principle. Sorry, I've got a hair. Here's one principle more than anything else that's really key. The more your writing sounds like a casual observation about the world, the less resistance it generates. The moment your language points directly at the reader, the conscious mind wakes up and starts evaluating. And evaluation kills resonance before it's even started. This was something that I really struggled with. I think I used to love pointing the finger, but let me give you some practical tools to help apply this to your content. And everything we're about to look at, again, is aimed at the world, not at the person we're reading. So the first tool is negative disassociation. You create two groups. You describe the default and you hint at the exception without ever closing the loop. You let the reader place themselves. So I might say something in my industry like, Most people are still chasing visibility for the sake of it. And then every once in a while, you come across someone who's decided that being trusted matters more than being seen in a soft way. It's incredibly profound. And I never said who that person is, but every person reading it is already deciding which group they're in. And you know what? They're all choosing the second group. The second tool is identity. And I can't underline how important identity is in your content. You describe a type of person that exists in the world. You make it aspirational, but only just a foot ahead, 10% ahead of where they see themselves. Close enough to be true, but far enough to feel worth reaching for. And again, you never close the leap. You leave that space for them to step into it themselves. And it might look like this. There's a certain kind of person who stops trying to figure LinkedIn out and starts showing up with a clear message, steady visibility, and conversations that actually turn into clients. I'm not talking about anyone directly. I'm describing a type. But every person is quietly reading it and asking, is that me? And because it's just ahead of where they are, the answer is not yet, but I want to be. And that's resonance, not persuasion, not declaration. Your content is syncing with the story your reader is already telling themselves. And when that happens, conversion doesn't feel like a decision. It feels like it's already in play. So we've talked about resonance, about syncing with the narrator, already running inside your reader's head. But there's one more layer to this. Because before somebody can resonate with your content, they have to feel safe enough to let it in. And that requires something most LinkedIn content never creates: permission. Think of it as a ladder, and each rung takes your reader a little bit deeper. You miss a rung or jump too fast, and the mask snaps back on, and you'll lose everything you've built. The first rung is the lightest. It's just honesty. Saying something true that everyone knows, but nobody is saying out loud. So it might be most people aren't struggling with the algorithm. They're scared of saying anything that might lose them approval. And in that moment, it brings clarity, and we start thinking back to how we are creating content, how we're feeling about content. And that's it. Nothing dramatic, but something shifts when your reader encounters that line, because it breaks the normal script. It signals your content is going somewhere different, and the mask loosens just enough to keep reading. The second rung goes a little bit deeper. Now, you're not just acknowledging a reality, you're critiquing it. And crucially, you're bringing the reader with you. Two people who see the same thing that most people don't. It could be something like, most people are posting to stay visible, but there's a smaller group, and we've realized that being remembered is worth more than being seen. Notice that word weave. You're no longer just an authority talking at somebody. Now you and the reader are now looking at the same thing together from the same side. And that's the beginning of trust. And no amount of polished content can manufacture that. And I have created over the years a lot of polished content that never took people on this kind of journey. And then the third rung is where it gets personal. And this is where you stop critiquing the world, but you say something true about yourself, something slightly uncomfortable, something that signals I'm not performing here. For me, it sounded like this. I spent years trying to cajole my audience and force the sale. And the worst part, it worked for a while. That last line is everything. It would have been easy to stop at the confession, but it worked for a while makes it human. It makes it complex, and your reader's brain registers that, hey, this person isn't performing vulnerability. They've actually lived this. And when that happens, something shifts. Your reader stops evaluating your content and starts trusting the person behind it. When the gap closes, that's when the gap closes, not because you've convinced anyone, not because your hook was clever or your CTA was strong, but because you created conditions for trust to form. From the I love you content to I'd love to work with you, that's not a sales problem. It's never been a sales problem. It's a permission problem. And now you know how to solve it. So here's what I want to leave you with. Everything we've covered today, the authority imprint, the novelty break, identity softening, resonance, it all points to the same thing. Conversion doesn't break at the pitch. It breaks much earlier in places most people never think to look. And that's exactly why I've put together the conversion gap audit to show you where your LinkedIn presence is losing people before your content even gets a chance to do its job. It's free. It takes under 5 minutes. There's 3 sections: your identity gap, your credibility gap, your conversion gap. And by the end of it, you'll know exactly where LinkedIn is losing you people and why the right people aren't taking the next step. The link is in the comments now, so go and do it today while everything we've covered is still fresh, because this section is where your lowest score is and where your conversion is breaking down. So that's where we want to start. And if your results show you the gap that you want help closing it, there's a link at the end of the audit just to book a free call with me. It's not a pitch, it's just a conversation about what closing that gap would actually look like for you. So where does conversion begin? Long before you think it does. But now you know where to look. And that's it from me today.